Well, this felt like a bigger win for City than maybe it would have about 2 or 3 months ago, in terms of just being knocked out of that top 24 in the Champions League heading into that last match day, of a declining position in the league. They really need to get their season back on track. A couple of new signings of the 11 in Kasanov and Marmoush against a Chelsea team that had started to hit a brick wall. Fantastic start to the season, but had slowly started falling down the table, picking up really poor results where they were blowing teams away earlier on in the season. And it felt like a game that Chelsea couldn't lose and City had to win. And ultimately, it resulted in City winning 3-1 with goals through Josko Gvardiol, Erling Haaland, and Phil Foden. And we're going to come and discuss now about how that came to pass in this very teacher versus student game with Pep Guardiola facing his former assistant Enzo Maresca. Now, this was a very different formation from City, and I guess what could be a sign of what they're going to produce going forward. It would be with Akanji and Kasanov as the centre-back pairing, but in front of them would be almost a midfield diamond, with Foden coming in from the right half space, the right wing position, to form the tip of that diamond. He had a lot of freedom, and he had a lot of ability to kind of move where he wanted deep and try and spin and get him behind, with Bernardo Silva in the right side, Gundogan in the left side, and Kovacic as the deeper pivot. Gvardiol and Nunes would get forward from fullback, and they would be the source of width within this team. Marmoush would look to play in the left half space, but could also be found typically higher up against the defensive line, almost in line with Erling Haaland, who was the striker. And Chelsea would drop off in a more zonal sense. They would start pressing higher as the game went on and go in a bit more 4-4-2, but typically they would try and box City in and prevent them from playing out. And that would be with Jackson, Palmer, and either a mixture of Madueke or Sancho tucking in to form the front three. Now, if City tried to build up on a certain side, then you get one of these wingers dropping in to make it a back five and guard their fullback, allowing the opposite Chelsea fullback to mark the width on the other side. More often than not, it was on this left-hand side, and when City would build up on this left-hand side, they really would congest this area. So when it was built up on the right, Sancho would drop in, but typically he'd be part of the front three because of this. It would be with Jadon Sancho in that front three, and they would start on the three deeper players, but would look to go and engage the player on the ball in the deeper area. Ederson would also typically move up and offer himself as an extra man in the build-up. So let's just say if the ball goes to Akanji, you'd get Palmer pressing around the outside from Gundogan into Akanji. Caicedo would then look to cover the pass into Gundogan and make sure that was shut off as well. So he'd be ready to cover whoever went to press if it was Jackson. And you get occasionally Enzo Fernandez doing it on the left-hand side, but he had more responsibility with looking after Phil Foden, which was a harder task because Phil Foden's movement was unpredictable as he had a complete free role. He could take up any position he wanted, especially being the tip of that diamond. And so he'd look to operate in and around Erling Haaland, looking for the ball to feet where he could quickly get it on the half turn and then play forward to the runners in behind in Marmoush and in Erling Haaland, or maybe even fire it out to the wide areas who would look to attack the width. And Fernandez did struggle up against him. He has a bit of a mobility disadvantage up against Phil Foden, and he could find space around him all sorts. And City, to be fair, would look to overwhelm that Chelsea press by dropping in a midfielder into the back line, and that would make it wider. It would create more angles for them to play around that Chelsea shape. It would bring Caicedo up a little bit early, with Palmer not knowing whether to sort of stick or twist, stay in on Gundogan, or look to go and maybe press into that back line. Jackson the same, so they'd almost form a little bit of a four in the front line, zonally trying to cut off the passing lanes into the centre of the pitch. But where City excelled in this game, especially second half, was their ability to go direct and go completely in behind as Chelsea looked to shut the pitch. Because it was a bit of a struggle for City to play out in these deeper areas because of how congested it was in that centre area and how Chelsea could lock up the centre of the pitch. Also, Kasanov had a debut to forget in many ways. So his passing was a little bit loose. You could tell it was getting to him a little bit. He was firing passes into players that were marked and they were easy cut out, and they did force some transition opportunities for Chelsea. And as a result, when Chelsea did look to go and press and did look to be more front-footed, they got a bit of success. I thought at points they dropped off too easily, allowed City a bit too much pressure, and allowed City to get up the pitch quicker, especially with Ederson playing a strong role in this. And I criticised him in the PSG game because he went direct a lot, and it was pretty poor, some of his quality. He went direct a lot in this game, and not only was he fantastic in his long passing, Erling Haaland was as well. I actually think that second half was the best half of football I've seen Erling Haaland have for City, just in terms of his general all-round play. I thought the way he used his body up against the likes of Chalobah and Colwill, he physically bullied all throughout that half to hold the ball up, turn and run in behind, or lay it off to on-rushing players, to the likes of Phil Foden, to the likes of any midfielders that would support coming forward, Marmoush maybe. And I thought he was excellent. Is attacking one on one, getting in behind, and whoever was ended up marking him had a bit of an issue. As Chelsea would look to be a little bit more aggressive, pushing up the pitch, his presence would just drop either Chalobah or Cole just that little bit deeper, leaving him in behind the defensive line, inviting the runs from the supporting cast. And it's important when he plays that role that those runs need to come from those supporting players. And this is where I thought Marmoush, who I thought was excellent without necessarily impacting the game. I thought as a sign of things to come, which, let's not forget, he wouldn't have had too many training sessions with this lot. I thought he was really, really good. His movement is sudden, and he did a great job at points of pulling into this area here, suckering Reece James into him, and then quickly turning in behind to look for the long ball in behind. James couldn't contest with him really, couldn't be physical and aggressive enough to get close to him when he was in these deeper areas and force him from preventing the run. Also lacks a little bit of athleticism when he turned and went in behind. James couldn't turn and keep up with him, so he had to rely on his defenders covering to get goal side of him. The only thing that you could criticise Marmoush about a little bit was his offside awareness was a little bit lacking. But I think that's a case when you play this style, you'll have games like this. So if it sustains, then it may be a bit of an issue. But I thought if he just corrected his run at points, if he just curved his run a little bit, he's going to get goals. He's going to get some serious amount of goals playing that way because his acceleration was unreal. The way he just moved away. And his timing of it was excellent as well. The way he was reading the opposition and turning them. To be fair, though, when Reece James was pushed into the right-back position because Madueke was up the field, Chalobah was engaging with him. And I thought Chalobah did a much better job in winning the ball back off of him and moving up the field to create transitional opportunities for Chelsea than James did. I thought James just got nowhere near him, really. Just didn't contest with him well enough at all. Also, the fullbacks, I thought their direct running was excellent. Gvardiol got a little bit of joy down this left-hand side. Through Madueke just not being as switched on defensively, also his movement to come from out to in was fantastic at times. Reece James again couldn't deal with the movement around him of Marmoush and Gvardiol. At points he was left isolated against those two with Madueke, but he still didn't do a good enough job regardless. Nunes is out to win run. I mean, it combined excellently those two for the first goal for City, moving inside each and being the two most attacking players from the direct ball over the top. And it was interesting that the number one weapon for Pep Guardiola in this game was the long ball, was the direct pass from back to front. Erling Haaland doing what we've kind of always wanted Erling Haaland to do. And, selfless with his play. It helps when you've got Robert Sanchez just... I criticised Wojciech Szczesny the other night for being a poor sweeper keeper. I have no words for that Robert Sanchez performance. I mean, in terms of distances, in terms of managing situations and reading direct passes, he was absolutely all over the place. That second goal was shameless. He's been caught in the middle of coming out to press and dropping back on his goal line for about 5 minutes. And as a result, City get their 3 goals and fantastic attacking performance from them and something you have to give Pep Guardiola a lot of credit for because I'm sure it's not something he has built into his game plan, but you've got to use your strengths at points, and that's what this City have. They don't have the Rodri and Kevin De Bruyne to take control of the ball. What they have are fantastic players in transition. That front 5, unbelievable in terms of what they can do from a direct pass over the top. Use it, you have it. On to the Chelsea attack. The Chelsea would look to build up in a very sort of one-sided 2-4-4, and that would be with Reece James inverting from right back into the centre midfield alongside Caicedo and Enzo Fernandez, who would typically drop off a lot more from an attacking left half space to make it a midfield 3. Cole Palmer could also do the same on the right side, but typically found himself a lot more in the attacking right half space. Jackson in the left side, pulling off a little bit more. Wide play staying wide, and Cucurella in a more orthodox left-back position. So naturally, City could press over onto one side and force them that way. But I thought Chelsea in their build-up were very, very good. Their composure and their quality to play out under the pressure of City was top draw. Sanchez as well coming in to make her a +1. Kovacic would drop in on Palmer to give that a little bit of added protection. So Akanji could essentially be the +1 in the defensive stage, which he's fantastic at, by the way. That is, for me, the best way to use Manuel Akanji. City have used him as an aggressive centre-back, as a stopper. And it's not that he can't do it, I just think his reading of situations when being that deeper man and having the pace to cover him behind is so useful. And I just think that's where he's best suited to. So Foden, Bernardo Silva, Gundogan, and Marmoush would press onto the 4 in front of the defensive 2. Now, naturally, that would push him in quite narrow because of that. So Marmoush would come inside. And they'd also look to go and press if the ball went from Sanchez, as Haaland would look to come in from Colwell onto Sanchez, who could play it to Chalobah. This would cause maybe Gundogan or Marmoush to come and press in these areas, maybe freeing up Reece James to try and shadow the pass in, but then the movement of Caicedo to drop in and then play a little pass through that City press to try and exploit the space they created by going to engage. They wouldn't panic either if that pass wasn't on, so Caicedo would then look to drop in if maybe Gundogan covered that run in while pressing. He'd look to play back to Sanchez, who could offer a little bit more, who could play a difficult ball in to either Colwell if Haaland had been caught in between, or if Bernardo Silva had come into press, then that would leave Cucurella free, and they did a really good job of finding those difficult little chip passes into Cucurella, who could then look to turn and attack up the field from this area. So real high quality in the build-up area from Chelsea at points, got through City's press. Even at points where City felt so outnumbered, they would push Kovacic in from his deeper area, allowing Akanji to stick closer to Palmer to make it a 4-4-2 press. There was still that issue where Sanchez could hold onto the ball and use his composure on the ball to draw a Man City player in and use little rotations through the likes of Fernandes, then playing it into Caicedo and then getting behind the player that had gone to press Sanchez. Again, causing Kovacic to press and a pass could go through to Reece James. And once they sort of got free of that City press, it would look to be direct. Now, you had the movements of the likes of Madueke, Jackson, Sancho and Palmer. Palmer, obviously a fantastic player in transition as well as on the ball. And he wouldn't look to get on the ball as much. He would look to try and attack that area, maybe using his run to receive the ball over the top or to drag Gvardiol in, that they could then allow Madueke to get the ball in space. And Madueke did offer a threat. He got his goal in the first half, and he did have a lot of moments in the second half where maybe he could have created something a little bit more composure and Chelsea could have had something a bit more to celebrate. Again, not to compile misery on this guy, because I'm sure he felt rough, and to be fair, he had a bit of the Donny van de Beek about him where every time the camera went to him, his face looked like it was about to break into tears. And I do think, to be fair, I think people underestimate the pressure he would have been facing. I know he's a 19-year-old mate, or 19-20, making his debut at City, come for 40 million, but being the first player from a country that, to be honest with you, I don't even think many people know exists, the pressure he'd probably face from his homeland to make a big impact, that he'd be carrying basically the pride of that country's football, because him being a success opens doors massively, and he would have no doubt felt that in the last couple of weeks while this transfer was happening. So I have a lot of sympathy for the kid, because for a 20-year-old to be taking that on, that's a tough lot to deal with. And against Chelsea in his first game, I mean, being thrown into the fire, and I'm not criticising Pep. Pep's the manager; he's got to make these decisions. And you're signing for Manchester City, you know, you've got to rise to the challenge. That's the challenge of a big club like this. So he'll learn from this. I think this was an important game for him in many ways, but obviously you can't allow this to become frequent. But use it as a learning experience. So he, again, just to highlight his struggles, I thought his reading of the long ball at points was really poor. Sometimes he'd get caught too close to Jackson, too far away, and he just didn't manage it well enough. Even if Jackson dropped in, Kusanov would move to engage, and he wasn't physically good enough to just come and challenge and win the ball back aggressively. And so Jackson could look to play around the corner and maybe look to play it to a supporting player in Enzo Fernandez and play forward. Also, in the points where he was in the deeper areas and the ball had come long from that Chelsea defence towards Manchester City's box, his reading of the long ball was so poor. And even when you look at the first goal of the game, the Chelsea goal, got caught too close to Jackson, ball goes over the top of him, doesn't generate enough power on the header. Jackson does really well to nip in front and lay a ball off to Madueke, who has an open goal to score. So that was an issue. But again, teething pains, growing pains. He'll learn from this and look to do better. I thought Madueke had his success as well, as I was just saying, against Gvardiol. I thought a real lack of overlap from the fullbacks. It's almost as if Chelsea was scared to overcommit. Reece James didn't get forward, and whether that's because Enzo Maresca is trying to manage his high-intensity running, maybe he doesn't feel like he has it in him to make those bursting runs up and down the right wing because of the amount of injuries he's had. He's trying to manage him. Who knows? But also, I feel like if you're taking that quality away from Reece James, is he worth putting in the team? Maybe, but I'm not as completely convinced as I was before with him attacking the right wing and using his delivery, which is fantastic, to put crosses in. Neville was very impassioned on commentary about them putting Kasanov under pressure, and I don't think they really did that enough at all. Sancho didn't really have anything on the left-hand side. I thought he was anonymous as hell. Poor on the ball, poor with his movement. Didn't offer enough, and at points Chelsea made it a little bit too easy for City. And where they had a lot of success with the build-up in the first half, second half it felt like they were going direct far too early. And City were in a good position where they could recover well. Kovacic could move back onto Palmer and block him from getting the ball, and he didn't really see a great deal of the ball to create like we know he can. And so, to be fair to City, a really good defensive performance. And as a result, Chelsea didn't do enough to stretch that midfield and find space in it, because we know there's space you can hit in it. And they went direct, which fair enough, that can be used to create the space, but then they didn't react to the second balls well. They didn't get players forward enough to capitalise on it. It's as if they got direct and then their whole instinct was getting a shot away quickly, not controlling the possession then and that point off and sustaining it and forcing openings in that City midfield. But hey-ho, City did their job well. Defenders defended one-on-one really well, bar Kasanov. And they get the 3 points, much deserved. But I'd love to know what you guys think, so don't just take my word for it. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below, tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.